Hi, my name is Rachel Paxton, and today I'm going to show you how to can potatoes. In this class you'll learn how to can potatoes. I'll lead you through the process step by step. I'll give you the recipe and canning supply list that you can download and print out for future reference. You'll find those in your course materials, and you'll also gain the confidence you need to try more pressure canning recipes on your own. My name is Rachel Paxton. I'm a freelance writer and mom of 5 children ages 28 to 6. This is me and my husband Dave. We've been married for 20 years, and these are 3 of our children. Zachary and Christian are twins. They're almost 11, and Trenton is 6. We also have 2 daughters that are ages 28 and 26. I've been canning for more than 20 years, and I'm also the owner of the website creativehomemaking.com. For this recipe, you'll need about 25 medium potatoes. It depends on how many potatoes you have and how many jars you want to can. This many potatoes filled about 6 quarts jars, so it just depends on how many potatoes you have. You can use any kind of potatoes. I used Yukon Gold potatoes, but you can also can red potatoes and russet potatoes. You'll also need a pressure canner, a jar lifter, a wide mouth funnel, and looks like I used 7 quarts for this recipe. You also need a dial gauge pressure canner. For this recipe, you definitely need a pressure canner. You have to use a pressure canner to can potatoes. They're a very low acid food. If you don't have a canner, I recommend getting a pressure canner. You can use a pressure canner for boiling water canning or pressure canning. You can only use a boiling water canner for boiling water canning. You can get this for about $75 on Amazon. There's a link in your course materials in the supply list. And this is a dial gauge canner. There are 2 kinds of canners, a dial gauge and a weighted gauge canner. Both of them work great, but this is the dial gauge. This is the one that I use, so this is the one I'll show you how to use today. You also need a jar lifter. Wide mouth funnel is great so that you can get your food in your jars easily. You need to sterilize your jars, rings, and lids in the dishwasher. It's okay to reuse jars and rings, but you cannot reuse lids. You need to use a new lid each time. You need to fill your pressure canner with about 3 inches of water and get it started heating. This recipe is really simple. All you need to do is peel and wash the potatoes, cut off any bad spots, and chop them into small cubes. Next, place them in a large stock pot and cover them with water. You want to boil them for 2 minutes. You're not trying to cook the potatoes. You just want them heated before you put them in the jars. Ladle your potatoes into your sterilized jars, leaving an inch headspace. The headspace is the amount of space between your potatoes and the top of the jar. Headspace is very important when you're pressure canning, especially. When you heat your food in the jars, the food will expand, and if there's not enough room left in the jars can explode. So make sure that you leave the correct amount of headspace for the recipe you're preparing. Next, you want to fill the jars with boiling water, again leaving an inch headspace. Next, wipe off the rims of the jars with a damp dish towel or paper towel and place the lids and rings on the jars. They don't have to be super tight, just finger tight. Put the jars in the canner. As you'll notice, the jars are not covered with water. In a boiling water canner, they're covered, but in the pressure canner, your water will probably cover about half of the jars, and that's fine. They don't need to cover the jars. You want to process your jars at 10 pounds of pressure for 35 minutes for pints or 40 minutes for quarts. If you live over 1,000 feet in elevation, you're going to need to adjust your pressure and your processing time. There's an altitude adjustment chart in your course materials, so if you need to adjust those, check your chart. This is what a pressure canner looks like. When you get started, you want to put the lid on, line up the arrows to lock it in place, turn the heat on your stove on high, remove the pressure regulator from your vent pipe, and steam will start coming out of the pipe. When you see the steam coming out, you want to wait about 10 minutes and then put your pressure regulator on. And then you'll start noticing that the pressure starts building in the pan, and the lid lock will pop up, and then the dial on the dial gauge will start moving. When the dial gauge gets to 10, you want to turn the temperature on your stove way down to low or medium low. You want the temperature to stay right, or the pressure to stay right at 10 pounds. If it drops below 10 pounds, you need to get it back up to pressure before you start timing. And if it ever drops below 10 during timing, you need to start the time over again after you increase the pressure to 10 again. So after you can get it at a constant pressure, start your timer. After the time is up, turn off the stove and just let your pan sit there. Don't move it or take the lid off. You need to wait till your lid lock goes down to make sure the pressure is out of the pan. When the pressure's out, wait a few more minutes, about 5 minutes or so, and then you can remove the lid and take the jars out. Use a jar lifter to remove the jars and set them on the kitchen counter to cool. It can take quite a while for the jars to cool off and settle. You might notice the water is still boiling in the jars when you take them out. Don't disturb them, let them cool off. Usually your jars will seal while they're in the canner, but it can take 10 to 15 minutes for them to seal. Once you take them out, you should hear a pinging noise. To tell if your jars are sealed or not, push your finger down in the center of the lid, and if the lid goes down and up again, then it is not sealed. And you shouldn't be able to push down on it. It should stay flat. That's how you know it's sealed. And if it is sealed, you can store it in a dark, cool area for 1 or 2 years. If it did not seal, you can still eat it. Put it in the refrigerator, and it needs to be eaten within a week. I had never really thought about canning potatoes before. You might wonder why you want to can potatoes when they're so inexpensive. But if you go to the trouble of growing them in the garden, you don't want them to go to waste if you're trying to store them for the winter. If you have a root cellar, you can probably store them all winter, but most people don't have one of those. I know I don't. I would love to have one. So potatoes will not last just even sitting in your basement all winter. So when your potatoes are starting to soften a little bit, this is a great way to preserve them so that they'll last all winter. And another thing that I do is that my potato crop didn't do too well last year, so I like to go to the grocery wholesaler and buy a 50-pound bag of potatoes for about $10. But we never can eat them all before they start to go bad, so we eat as many as we can, and then I can the rest, so it's still really inexpensive. And it's also great to have potatoes already cooked and on hand, because it takes a lot of time to peel and cook potatoes when you want to cook something. But these potatoes are completely cooked and just ready to heat and eat. You can use them to make clam chowder or corned beef hash. You can make hash browns out of them. You can also use them to make potato salad. Anything that you'd use cooked potatoes for. It makes it really handy. So I have the 7 jars here that are all ready when I need potatoes for something. So it will save me a lot of time in the future, and it didn't take very long to can at all. So I hope you enjoyed this recipe, and I hope to see you again soon.